Hello, 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 and welcome to today's episode of Her Version. This podcast is dedicated to sharing stories of struggle and triumph, a platform that allows individuals to tell their truth in order to inspire and uplift others. For those of you that are new to this podcast and like content like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button, follow, like, and share. I am your host, Sabrina Victoria. Let's jump right in. Wow, we already have so many people jumping on live. Thank you so much for being here and hanging out with Amanda and I. Sorry about that. If you are watching this live or on the replay, if you could share this video wherever you are watching us at so we can get more eyes and more ears on our content and our stories, we would so much appreciate it. I want to thank you for joining us today on Her Version. This platform is built on storytelling and the understanding that many times our greatest learning experiences come from listening to other people's stories. Today, I'm speaking with an amazing woman named Amanda J.P. Brown. Amanda went from high school dropout and drug user to college graduate, earning 2 master's degrees, one in social work and the other in criminal justice. She is the author of You're Brave Enough, 8 Daily Practices to Be Your Own Hero, and a contributing author in the international bestselling book, Phoenix Rising, Powerful Women Who Rose from the Ashes. Yes, Amanda's been divorced twice and understands how terrifying it is to shine a light on your darkness as you journey toward healing from your past, and just how messy it can get as you begin to uncover the human you want to be. Today, she guides individuals the brave way through tough life transitions like divorce to gracefully release their old expectations and patterns and rebuild their lives confidently, free from shame, yes, and self-judgment, 100. When Amanda isn't writing or coaching, she enjoys spending time outdoors with her dog, Leroy. Oh my God, I love that name. On the Southern Oregon coast where they live. Welcome, Amanda. How are you?
I'm so good. Thank you for having me. It's great to be with you, Sabrina.
Yes, thank you for hanging out with us. Where'd you get the name Leroy? That's an old
It's an
name.
old name. Yeah, it actually just kind of came up when we got him. Oh, it's been like 3 years now. I think, yeah, 3 years. He's 3 years old, and it just kind of fit him. And last name being Brown, Leroy Brown, just kind of bad Leroy Brown, and it just kind of stuck.
That is awesome. I do have to say that my fiance just poked his head in and he goes, "Is that her real hair?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm sure that's her real hair." He's like, "Oh my God, I love
Yeah,
it."
a lot. People are like, "Oh my gosh, where'd you get that done?" I'm like, "It's natural."
That
You know,
is so cool.
no idea it would look like this when I finally decided to stop coloring it. So,
Were you one of the 2020s?
no, I actually did it in 2019. I did like last color was January, like 16th of 2019, and I decided to grow it out. It was as dark as your hair, and I stuck with it, and then I chopped it literally all off in the end of September of 2019, and like it was super short.
Yeah.
And then I just have
No
been letting it
kidding.
grow. Yeah.
Just because you were tired of dyeing it, right?
Yeah, tired of dyeing it, and I really felt like I wanted to embrace more of who I was, and I felt like every time I kept coloring it, I was hiding pieces of myself and not for me, and this is just every woman's story around her body and her hair and what she wears and makeup is all personal, right? So for me, I just felt this like really big yearning for a year to kind of embrace this. And I was super scared to, but I felt this calling to like, no, you've been trying to lighten your hair for years. It's not looking the way you want. It's a complete mess. You're paying tons of money, tons of time. And what if you were just brave enough to like see what happened? And so that's what I did. And I had a really unusual experience because everybody was like, wow, I really like how it's growing in. And I got lots of compliments and I'm like, wow, this is really weird. But I feel like it was because I was really having that courage to step into that space of who I was and who I was becoming without trying to resist it and cover it up so much. And so it was really symbolic for me to do that.
That is awesome. I love it. I
Thanks.
was in 2020. I think I went a little over a year and then had a really big speaking gig, like
Oh, yeah.
really big. And I have really curly hair. So
Mhm.
even though it was gray, probably up to here, which is a good amount, because my hair is so curly, it was really like up to here.
Yeah.
This wasn't like I just didn't feel comfortable. So
Yeah.
I'm
I
back in the
get it.
cycle again. I'm
I
back
know
in the cycle
that.
again.
Yeah, I know that, and it's also would have been really hard, like, if you would have said, "Okay, it's really here," but because it's so curly, then to chop it off, it would have been a really big deal to do that
Yeah,
right before a
yeah.
speaking gig. Yeah, I
And
get
that's what I was kind of gonna try to do, and I think that a lot of girls do that, is just
Mhm.
kinda let it grow to a good length and then chop it, and then you're good,
Yeah.
you can let it grow. But it
Mhm.
just because it's so curly, it just takes that much it grows fast, but it just doesn't
Yeah,
look like it grows fast because it's
yeah.
every inch that grows, it's really only this much because of the coil.
Right.
But anyways, it looks beautiful, so I thought I'd give you that little
Thank you.
compliment there. He just kind of poked his head in through the door, and I thought that was super sweet. So,
Yeah. No, that's
but I'm so excited to have you here. I know that you are doing so much in your world, in your community, and I want to just dive into all of that goodness. But one of the things that this podcast is based on is storytelling, is allowing women the space and the opportunity to share some of their stories. One of the things that I talk about so often is, when you're in and amongst the public, when you're out in the grocery store, at Starbucks, getting gas in your car, you look around at people, and sometimes you're thinking to yourself, wow, that person looks like they really got their stuff together. And if you really sat down and you talk to these individuals, you realize, holy crap, like I am sitting in front of a total warrior, a total badass, somebody who's gone through some stuff in their life that you never would have known. And I
yeah.
love this podcast so much because it really allows individuals the platform to be able to speak that thing that like they don't normally get to go around and just talk about. You just kind of live your life day to day. You're working on things, you're going through challenges, but to actually be able to inspire people and to be able to share some of your backstory, to give
Mhm.
hope to others just isn't a thing that you can just do out in your daily life. So I would
Yeah.
love to kind of allow you the space to be able to share, some of your past, some of the things that you've gone through, a pivot or a change that you went through in your life that was impactful to you. And then I would love for you to kind of tell us what you learned from it.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's so many. As I've gotten older, there's been different stories and different experiences. And going, I think one of the fundamental ones was really going from that, using drugs and experiencing that in like, high school. And that was a huge one. But I think one of the big ones that I want to talk about, so I had that experience and I just kind of one day woke up and was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And I went to school. School was safe. It was predictable. I knew what to expect. I could go to class and I knew what they wanted from me. So it was really easy in that context because it was part of what I used to help create that container to create safety when you're going through a big change. But one of the things I really think I want to talk about is fast forward many years, um, getting through school, being through one divorce already, being in a second relationship. And it was the moment when I really kind of started to understand I had to really work through my own shame and really work through self acceptance. So I had done this big thing. I had stopped using drugs. I never went to treatment. I just went to school. I kind of was, just kind of moved on in my life and just kind of went, okay, next. And I never really processed anything until in 2012, I decided I wanted to do a bikini competition. And so I started working with this trainer to work on my body, to have more self confidence, because nobody really knew that I was struggling with my self-confidence all the way from that time until, so that was probably in 1997, 98. No,
Yeah.
90, yeah, 97. And so all this time I had been struggling with my confidence and things. And I would like you kind of, you're confident and then you're not, right? There's this weave of going back and forth between being in it and then really feeling like you're a fraud, and what if people know about me and my past and then they're not going to like me. And so I worked with this coach for a few years, and it's really kind of what started the trajectory of where I'm at in my life today. And I remember sitting, one of the pivotal moments, I remember sitting in a retreat with her talking about, what's your superpower formula? How do you walk people through what you do? And I was like, okay. Because it hit me like a bomb that I had been avoiding talking about I carried so much shame around the substance abuse that I didn't talk about it. I never acknowledged it. I called it Mandy's crazy time. It was something that was a secret. And while I would hold up this, like, if people don't like me because of it, well, screw them. But yet, the same essence, I didn't want anybody to know about it because I was uncomfortable with it. And it's really that moment of having the realization that until I come to terms and accept this part of my journey and my past and who I am and this piece of myself, I'm not going to be able to move forward confidently in my life. I'm not going to be able to have the relationships I want to have. I'm not going to be able to do these things because I'm skirting around trying to avoid this piece of myself. And so I really had to sit down and come to terms with, how do I tell my story in a way that I feel confident and comfortable in, even though it's scary and vulnerable and it's going to be uncomfortable, but comfortable enough that I can put it out there, articulate myself, and not worry about what other people think, because I'm really proud of myself for coming through this piece of my life. And so that moment of understanding that self-acceptance was the way through my shame was huge for me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Hmm.
It seems like you've really, broken through some serious barriers in your life.
Yeah. Yeah. I have. I mean, the addiction alone is like huge, right? And not talking about it does a disservice when we don't acknowledge the barriers. We just go, "Yep, I did that. Cool, move
Yep.
on," and we don't really acknowledge how brave it was or how much strength it took. And it wasn't until I had moved to Oregon after getting divorced and having all these rapid changes in my life that a friend said, I just want you to know not everybody can do that. And I was like, huh? Wait, this is like not something everyone can do? She's like, no, that's really brave. And I'm like, it's just, you don't sometimes realize
Yep.
what you're doing. And so it's that stepping back and going, wow, that really was brave. That really was an obstacle. Because sometimes we minimize our, like, what we overcome. And I had done so much of that, which invalidates our self-confidence because we're minimizing who we are, what we've overcome, the amazing things that we've done in our lives. And sometimes it's the smallest thing to us, but it's
Yep.
the biggest thing to someone else. And they're looking at us going, wow, how did you do that? And you're like, I don't know, I just did.
Yes. Yeah, I remember when I first started, well, I knew my story was pretty badassery, but
Mhm.
when I started sharing my story even more so, when people
Yeah.
really started to compliment, like, "Holy shit, what?" I'm
Yeah.
like, "Okay."
Funny because I've gotten, as I've gotten older, and I've done this work more, and now started dating again. Like, it's interesting to start to show who I am, and sometimes they're like, wow. And I'm like, yep, that's me. I finally got to the place that I'm like, yeah, that was pretty badass. And that is pretty cool. And I did that. And it wasn't always like that. It took, it took some process and took some feedback from hearing from other people and just really that acceptance of myself and that, wow, yeah, not everybody does this. Not everybody's comfortable talking about the struggles they go through. So even talking to a friend and sharing with one friend that you've in something you feel so alone in, and having them go, wow, I've struggled with that too, and you're like mind blown that you're not the only one.
Yes. When
So
did you, in what era did you start to really step into personal
mhm,
development? Where you were like, "This is something that I'm actually gonna, like, do?"
do yeah, in my 30s, in my like mid 30s, I was still, it's interesting because I look back and reflect on things. And from my first big relationship in my, early adult kind of teen, I struggled. I felt that was a really hard relationship. This was somebody I thought I was going to spend the rest of my life with. And then all of a sudden it was like gone. And I'm like, whoa. And so, hello, abandonment issues triggered again. Great. And so then it was like looking for the next person, which ended me up in a super toxic relationship. And all the meanwhile, I'm going to school for psychology. I want to be a psychologist. I want to, then I go into social work and that relationship ends. I go into another relationship without fully doing my own work. And it wasn't until I was in my last marriage that has ended that I really started stepping into that space. And it was in wanting to just accept more of myself, be more comfortable in my skin. And it really was kind of in my mid 30s that I was like, I'm so tired of not loving myself. And I just want to feel better. I don't want to be beating myself up and feeling like a failure all the time and that I'm inadequate and unlovable in some way, because that was a big story that I had, is that I was unlovable. And so, because I was so broken and so damaged because of all these things that have happened to me in my life, and was just tired of that. And so, it really was that moment, mid 30s, that I started to really step in. So, yeah. And it's just kind of expanded from there. In my 40s, it got even like more like intense of kind of, and then there's something switches where you're like, you know what? I'm not really concerned that much about other people. I'm more concerned about how I feel today.
Yeah, that's always such a nice shift.
Mhm. Yeah. It's an interesting shift because you don't always really know when it's gonna happen. It's just sometimes shows up and you're like, "Oh, this is what that feels like."
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. The cool thing is too, when you read about it, because I did so much reading, so much listening, so many videos and classes and curriculums and
Yeah.
certifications, and you hear this over and over again, like, "Be your own person and step into your power," and all this, and you're like, "Yes," but you're conceptually understanding it, but, like, not there mentally, and
Yeah.
then one day yeah, like, one day you look around and you're like, "Oh my gosh, I think I shifted, like, somewhere." I don't
Yeah.
even know.
That's exactly, it's like this full embodiment and integration that happens. Like you've done all this stuff and you're here and you're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna have so many books and podcasts too that I started with and that I was like, yes. And then like I'm like, but how do you do that? And then you just keep learning and you keep understanding and you keep growing and you keep trying things. And then one day it's like you choose and
Yeah.
then it's there. It's like you choose to step into that space. You choose to own that part of you. You choose to be like, I'm not going to be ashamed of who I am and I'm going to just own it. And then it's like there. And you're like, oh, wow, this is how that feels. And
Yeah.
it's hard to describe sometimes, but it's
Yeah.
really powerful when you get there.
Yes. Definitely. So did you say you've been divorced twice?
Yeah, divorced
Twice.
twice.
I want
Mhm.
to ask, through this journey, I can only imagine the difference in
Mhm.
like being
Mhm.
as a partner, between
Mhm.
first, second, and now you're dating.
Mhm.
What do you think is like the biggest mindset difference that you're like proud of that you actually
Mm.
like are
Yeah.
seeing and you're like, damn, girl, like the way that I'm handling my relationships now is so on point. Like, what are some things that you're noticing in yourself?
Uh, one of the big shifts, and I didn't see this until this last divorce, is that I'm not looking for anybody to save me anymore. I'm not looking for the piece to make me better. I'm not looking for someone to complete me. I've really understood that I'm complete. I'm fucking awesome. And I bring a lot to the table, and that I'm worthy of the life and the relationship that I want to experience. And I'm not going to waste my time trying to prove how amazing I am to someone else and that they should want to pick me, because I need to, for myself, be able to say, does this person fit what I'm looking for? And that it's this not like, will they accept me and love me? It's like, how do I feel in this person's presence? It's tuning in more to my own discernment and my feelings and my emotions, and paying attention to, what am I feeling? How do I feel in their presence? Am I good with this? Not are they good with me, but am I good with this? Do I like this? And that was the huge thing for me, is from my first marriage, I really did lose a lot of myself. I compromised a lot of who I was. I was trying to do things to please him, to make him happy, and none of it worked. And it left me rejecting more and more pieces of myself, till one day I walked into a work party for me, and I'm like, who the hell is this for? Because it wasn't for me. It was for the girl that was trying to make her husband happy. And I just felt this guttural like drop. And I was like,
Wow.
nobody knows me because I'm not showing up, and I don't even know who I am.
Yeah.
So, like, after that, I was like, I'm not ever going to do that again. I'm going to totally, be myself, and I'm not going to compromise. But unless you do your work, unless you kind of like become aware of your patterns and what happens when you become insecure with yourself, you don't necessarily make the same choices, and yet you do. Because it was like, okay, I'm listening to the music I love more. It's like I'm doing this more. But as soon as I met my second husband, there were a lot of other subtle ways that I was like, oh, you like that? I like that too. And it wasn't until later that I realized it wasn't that I liked it. It's that I liked being with him, seeing joy with him. And so that's what I liked. But it wasn't, so then it was this whole concept of me not showing up. So then looking like I'm lying about who I am, and unintentionally doing that, even though I wasn't. I just still was so craving to be accepted and loved, that I wasn't bringing what I wanted to share with somebody to the table, because I wasn't allowing myself to like sit in that space. And so, fast forward, divorce, dating again, and I've really started showing up and talking about, what do I like to do? What brings me joy? What am I open to? And really having those conversations where I show up, and it's just not like, oh, you like that, I like that too. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, okay. And so it's that piece of really owning who I am, and sitting in that, and then using what I want, what I'm looking for, and kind of assessing them for me versus, am I good enough for them?
Brilliant. So much of that is something that so many women need to hear.
Mhm. Yeah.
and being able to reach that pivotal point in your life is just so powerful. And I remember, being in the role of a victim of woe is me, of life is happening to me, of
Mhm.
blame, wanting to blame everybody and everything for the life that I was sitting in
Yeah.
and the shift that had to happen. Um, when you look at your life
Mhm.
from beginning to where you are now, what would you say is the number one lesson that you've learned
Mhm.
about life?
That in trying to please everyone, you abandon yourself. That was like a huge lesson for me, is that by trying to make everyone else love me and happy, that I rejected and abandoned myself and who I was and my essence and my beauty and my unique essence. And it was only in not trying to please others and really
Mhm.
just falling in love with myself that I was able to fully embody. And it's still work in progress, right? It's not like I'm perfect at this.
Yeah.
But that I could embody it and show up differently in relationships and understand where my trigger points were, where my tender spots were, and that I could, instead of seeking out approval and stuff from other people, that I could lean back into myself and go, what do I need? And how can I give myself that right now? But that was like one of the biggest lessons is that when we try to please others, we abandon ourselves.
When you were saying no one's perfect, you're not perfect, we're still all working on ourselves. I want to talk a little bit about limiting beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we're given limiting beliefs early in childhood, early in teenage years, and then we also adapt more
Yeah.
um, throughout our lives, in and out
Mhm.
of relationships, friendships, work
Mhm.
environments, society. What are some of the limiting beliefs that you have recognized
Mhm.
that you are either currently working on or have had to strip off and throw in the trash can?
Yeah. Well, one big one was that I had to be what other people wanted me to be in order to be loved. Like I had to mold and confine and like alter myself in some way to be accepted. And that's just, I don't believe that anymore. That's a really limiting belief that I need to do it this way. Um, and so that has been one of my biggest of like just this embodiment of stepping into that space. There have been so many that I'm like, okay, other limiting beliefs. I think that I had to be quiet, that I couldn't speak up, that I couldn't share my voice because if I did, if I was too much or too smart or too opinionated, that it would people would abandon me. And so a lot of times I didn't talk about what was important to me. I didn't share. And so then people were like, "Well, wait, what? That's something you care about?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, it's really important." And they're like, "I have no idea." And so that piece of not having not being able to speak up has been huge. And so learning that you're able to talk and say what you think and how you feel, and that doesn't take away from you or the relationship or the other person, even if you disagree on something, but that you have opinions and they're important and you're allowed to speak them and share. And it was that allowing myself to be like, you're allowed to talk about this. You're allowed to have an opinion about this. You're allowed to say, I fucking matter and how I feel matters. And I'm not going to put up with this because that was like a big thing of, well, I've got to understand where they're coming from and hold their perspective. But that a lot of times what happens is we do that so much, we unintentionally give that space to say that's okay with us even if it's not. And so it's coming to understand that there's a balance between understanding someone else's perspective but not at the expense where you are being harmed in the process. So
Yeah, absolutely.
those are a couple of the big ones. And then um yeah, that one of the things that it's okay to be courageous in your life. And I think one of the things is, people talk about being fearless. And what I have learned about fear and bravery and courage in your life is that you can fear space less. But every time you do something brave, every time you're courageous in your life, you are going to be scared shitless.
Yep.
And it's about choosing anyways. It's trusting yourself. And that was another big thing, just speaking of that, because I felt like I'd picked so many wrong relationships, I didn't trust myself. And so I had to learn in like my belief systems that I was able to trust myself. And that's been a huge process to go to work through and understand like that I can be trusted, but not necessarily with other people, with myself. And so that's huge because sometimes we don't trust ourselves and we're constantly looking to other people to guide us and tell us what to do. But it's leaning back and, people will give us information and advice and suggestions, but the choice is truly ours. And it's in that self trust that we get to make the decisions that feel right and aligned for us.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You've um we talked about divorce.
Mhm.
And, one of the biggest things that I see with couples just in general, I've done a lot of research on abuse, on toxicity, on narcissism. And, I don't know the inner workings of your divorce. However, I do know that it's like a third of people are in relationships that are abusive in one way or another, whether it's
Yeah,
verbally, physically, financially.
emotionally.
But there's still this lull in our society around divorce.
Yeah.
And it really scares um, individuals. I'm going to say predominantly
Mhm.
females, because we
Yeah.
usually like to be the good ones.
Mhm.
What was your thought process? How were you? And I'm asking because you've gone through it twice. So
Yeah.
one is heavy. How do you do it twice? So if you're going to ask
Yeah.
anybody, you ask somebody who's done it more than once.
Mhm.
What was your storyline with that? What were your feelings around that? Why did you decide to go through with that? And you're still alive. You
Yeah, I'm
didn't
so
die. Nothing happened.
lots of things happen, but nothing like I couldn't survive from. So, yeah, my first marriage was really bad, very toxic, very unhealthy. Um, and I was really scared to get it married again. Once you go through one divorce, you understand that relationships don't always last and that divorce is a real possibility. Um, and while this second relationship was really good in a lot of ways, it was also not good in a lot of other ways, and it wasn't healthy. Um, and it probably had some toxic elements to it, and it took me a long time. I was really unhappy in that relationship for years, and I struggled because This is also the relationship that I really started doing my personal development work. And actually, that was, I think, probably part of the issue in our relationship as I started doing this work and understanding that what I wanted and what I didn't want and what I liked and what I didn't like. And as I started to speak up for that, it was not accepted well because I wasn't being who I was and who I said that I was when the relationship started. I was
Yeah.
evolving and I was having this voice. And so there was for years, I mean, after our first, so we were together 6 years before we got married. And about a year into our marriage, I think we'd already gotten married. I had all these realizations about who I was and what I liked and didn't like. And, I remember having a conversation with him about, I bet you think I lied to you about who I was. And he goes, I absolutely do. And I'm like, take a deep breath. And I said, I can see that. I didn't feel safe enough back then when we met to show up with this stuff, to talk about these things. Um, and so we kind of navigated some of that. But the more work I did, the more I understood myself, the more it just started getting more complicated and it started getting more every time I did something and I wasn't perfect in the relationship, we do things, both people do things, but that process of wanting to do everything I could to fix my marriage, it and walk away knowing that I did everything I could and I did all the work that I could before I walked away. Like that was my thing. Like I wanted to try couples therapy. I wanted to do this. I wanted to kind of, okay, I'll back off here. I'll show up there. I'll try to, but the more and more I had some really great friends who were coaches and therapists and social workers. And so there were a few things that got said to me over the years. And one of the big things is like, what if he never changes and this is your life forever? And I'm like, huh? She's like, yeah. What if instead of looking at his potential, you look at what's happening in your relationship right now? And I'm like, Hmm, that doesn't feel good. And I don't really like you right now, but I'm going to sit with that. And it's like, when you have those great friends that call you out and you're like, yeah, no, I don't want to look at that, but now I have to.
Yeah.
And then, a couple years later, so this still took me time. It took me probably a good 4 years of like us just not jiving and not, I mean, we ended up towards the end being more like roommates, sleeping in separate rooms, not really even like putting on the facade for friends and stuff. And it was just so hard and draining and emotionally taxing to pretend to be happy, to pretend that everything was okay, when silently and secretly inside you're like dying. And I had another one of my good college friends goes, I love you, but I don't want to have this conversation in a year. And I was like, huh? She's like, I don't want to hear about how sad your life is and your relationship is. I don't want this for you. And I was like, and so it was kind of getting even people's reactions of, you've been talking about this for years. Like at what point do you choose, like either be okay with it and live your life and just suck it up, or do something about it. And so that was huge, but it took a lot of me feeling comfortable and getting to a point where I asked my soul one night, we got in a huge fight, and I just kind of turned in and I asked my soul, I'd been doing a lot of different works. I'm like, is this relationship done? And she was like, fuck yeah. And I was like, okay. And once we got to that point, once I was like, do you want a divorce? He was like, yes, I do. I'm like, great, so do I. Like, okay. It literally like that was in January. And by February, I moved out. May, we were divorced. And June, I was in Oregon. Like it literally in 5 months, my life completely changed. Once I literally decided to ask myself, what do you want? What do you need? And lean into that and trusting myself. But I didn't want to let go of that relationship because there were so many like fears. What if I don't find anybody again? What if nobody will accept me? And I have all this baggage and all those stories that you tell yourself to keep yourself in something versus like, what else is possible if I let go of this thing over here and open up to this possibility over on the other side. And I think that that was a lot of times through that process when we finally got to the space, I felt like I was off kilter. How I describe it is I'm like letting go of what was behind me and kind of leaning into what was in front of me that was unknown. And I was like teetering in between two worlds. But it was so exciting and scary. And I'd done so much processing and tried therapy and tried to work on myself. And at some point, you get to, I talk about it in the book, the second book that I contributed to, you get to the place on a bridge and you can't build it by yourself. You can't you can't fix a relationship by yourself. And if the other person isn't willing to do their work, the work, to come together with you, then there is nothing you can do except either accept and be okay with this and choose. And I think that's one of the things is knowing that you're choosing to stay in it or choosing something different. And either way is brave because it takes a lot of strength to stay in a relationship that you don't like. But it also takes a lot of strength and courage to step out and go, I'm not going to live like this anymore. And I think some of those moments of this can't be my life are the most powerful places for us to grow from and to learn from. And so for me, it was really getting comfortable with the fact that I was going to be okay and that I could build a life beyond this one and really trusting myself and knowing that I did everything I could and I'm okay with walking away from this.
Yeah, that is great. And I think that one of the most powerful things that I tell my mantra is everything is going to be okay.
Yeah.
I think that it's one of the most powerful things that you can say to yourself, and for you to
Mhm.
allow to hear yourself say
Yeah.
that reassurance
Mhm.
is fantastic. I so thank you for sharing some of that story. For those of you watching live, for those of you watching on the replay, we so appreciate you being here and hanging out with us. I want to ask
Mhm.
Amanda, for those watching live or on the replay, what exactly do you do?
Mhm.
What is the name of your company,
Yeah.
and where can people find you?
Well, so my business is just Amanda JP Brown. I do the Brave Way Through. So that's kind of evolving into that. I do a lot with an organ. I'm a therapist, but I also do a lot of coaching. And so I do coaching around transitions, specifically working with people who are navigating divorce or recently have navigated divorce, working through their stories, the narratives that they tell themselves, and helping them rewrite them into more empowering ways. So that's what I do.
Um, where can people find you on social media?
At Amanda JP Brown, it's pretty much all of my handles to make it simple for everyone.
Where do you hang out the most? Facebook, Instagram?
Most of Facebook, a little bit of TikTok, but Instagram's probably not my biggest right now, but Facebook is definitely the place that I'm at the most.
Awesome. Me too. Why do you do what you do?
Um, I do what I do because it is an honor to walk with people through their narratives and help them navigate their own darkness and watch them go into and through and out of this space for themselves and ripple change across their entire lives, and which ripples change throughout the world. So I do that because it's so empowering to watch people shift and become who they already are and really relish in loving themselves. And it's just an absolute honor and joy to watch.
That's beautiful. Well, I so appreciate you being here. I so appreciate you sharing some of your story. For those of you that resonate with Amanda and all the goodness that she shared today, make sure you check out her website, amandajpbrown.com. The link should be in the description wherever you are watching us at. And she hangs out predominantly on Facebook under Amanda JP Brown also. So thank you so much, lady. For those of you that are watching, make sure you connect with her, find her on social media, check out her website. We love to connect people here on this platform so that we can all continue to rise. Do you have any closing thoughts as we wrap up?
Just remember that bravery is your secret weapon. And if you are leaning towards, do I do this or do I do that? Choose the brave way through and trust yourself.
Yes. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Her Version podcast. This community is expanding every single day and is filled with females who are striving to do better than they did yesterday. For those of you that are new to this podcast and like content like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button, follow, like, and share. If you have an amazing story to share, reach out to me at hernation.life. I am your host, Sabrina Victoria, and I am so grateful to be here sharing a platform that allows people to share their truth and inspire others, as always.